He called 7 times on the first day we met. Not in a way that felt alarming. In a way that felt like sunlight. Like someone had decided I was the most important person in the room and couldn't stop himself from acting on it. The first call was to make sure I'd gotten home safely. The second was because he'd thought of something funny. The third was just to hear my voice. I remember standing in my kitchen that first night, phone in hand, thinking, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is what I've been waiting for. What I didn't know then, what it took me 2 years and a therapist I saw every week for 6 months to fully understand, is that the 7 calls were not spontaneous. They were not the overflow of genuine emotion. They were a strategy so well calibrated that it looked exactly like love because it was designed to. Love bombing doesn't look like abuse. That's the point. It looks like the most romantic, attentive, passionate beginning of a relationship you've ever experienced. It is overwhelming contact. Texts, calls, visits, framed as devotion. It is gifts that arrive before you've said you wanted anything. It is declarations of intensity that come so early they feel like confirmation of something you'd hoped for, rather than evidence of something wrong. And it works because most of us have spent our lives being told that love is supposed to feel like this. Like urgency, like being chosen. Like someone so certain about you that every normal social boundary dissolves in the face of what they feel. The mechanism is simpler than it sounds. What a love bomber creates in the early weeks of a relationship is dependency, before you have any real knowledge of who they are. The emotional high of being the center of someone's complete attention, the constant contact, the mirroring of your personality that makes them feel like your perfect match. The declarations that seem to confirm every good thing you wanted to believe about yourself creates a biochemical state that functions like addiction. Dopamine and oxytocin flood the system. The emotional brain learns to associate this person with safety, with belonging, with the particular feeling of being seen. And once that association is established, the person who created it has enormous leverage over your behavior. Because withdrawing the attention, even briefly, creates something that feels like withdrawal. He mirrored everything. This is the part that took me the longest to name, because when it's happening to you, it doesn't feel like a manipulation tactic. It feels like finding someone who finally understands you. He liked the same music I liked. He had strong opinions about exactly the things I found most interesting. He agreed with my take on situations in my professional life in ways that confirmed my own instincts. He was somehow both already the kind of person I was attracted to and becoming more like me in real time, adjusting his stated preferences toward mine in a way that felt like compatibility rather than calculation. Mirroring is a specific technique. It involves rapidly absorbing and reflecting back the values, preferences, communication style, and identity of the target. The goal is to create the experience of being deeply known, which is one of the most powerful emotional experiences a human being can have without the time and disclosure and reciprocal vulnerability that actually produce it. He was not becoming like me. He was performing like me, using the information I provided in early conversations as raw material for a reflection that I would mistake for a soul match. There were early signs I understood only in retrospect. The intensity of the relationship moved faster than I could track. By 3 weeks in, he was talking about where we would live together. By 5 weeks, he had introduced me to his family in a way that committed them emotionally before I had committed to anything. He became visibly distressed when I had plans that didn't include him. Not angry, not controlling, but hurt in a way that activated my impulse to reassure him. And the reassurance always cost me something small. A rescheduled plan with a friend. A night I'd wanted to spend alone. Each individual concession was tiny. The aggregate, over 2 years, was that I had restructured my entire life around his comfort. The shift from love bombing to control doesn't happen in a single identifiable moment. There is no day you can point to and say, that's when it changed. What happens instead is a gradual recalibration of what earns his attention and what withdraws it. The praise that was unconditional in the first weeks becomes conditional. You begin to notice, not consciously, not with words but in your body, that certain behaviors produce warmth and certain behaviors produce a cooling. The The behaviors that produce warmth tend to be the ones that put his needs first. The behaviors that produce the cooling tend to be the ones that prioritize your own. By the time I noticed the pattern clearly enough to name it, I had already accommodated it for so long that the accommodations felt like who I was. I no longer called certain friends often, because those friendships had caused friction. I no longer made certain professional choices, because my confidence in my own judgment had been quietly eroded by 2 years of subtle correction. I didn't think of myself as someone under control. I thought of myself as someone who had grown, someone who had learned, through this relationship, to be more thoughtful about other people's feelings. The insight that landed hardest in therapy was this. The idealization phase, the love bombing, wasn't separate from the control. It was the foundation of it. You can't control someone effectively who doesn't desperately want your approval. What the early weeks of the relationship did was create a person who desperately wanted his approval. The high of those first months became a reference point, something to return to, something to work toward. And the leverage that created was the leverage he spent the next 22 months using. The connections between love bombing and coercive control are now reasonably well documented in the psychological literature on narcissistic relationship patterns. The idealization phase, the devaluation phase, and the discard phase follow a recognizable cycle. But knowing the cycle intellectually, being able to name the phases, is not the same as being able to see yourself inside it. The emotional brain does not defer to the analytical brain when the attachment system is activated. Knowing that what you're experiencing is a manipulation does not remove the experience of it. What finally began to loosen things for me was not a dramatic moment of clarity. It was something much smaller. A conversation with a friend I hadn't seen in 4 months. A friendship that had become another casualty of the process of accommodation, in which she said something direct and specific about what she had observed in the previous year. Not a judgment, a description. The way I had changed in ways that had nothing to do with growing. The behaviors I had given up. The confidence I used to have. She said it simply, in the language of someone describing what she saw, and something in my body registered it before my mind had fully processed it. The 7 calls on the first night felt like love. They were information about what was coming, about who he already understood himself to be in relation to me. The problem is that information that looks like love is the most difficult kind to read accurately, because everything you want to believe about what you deserve and what's possible is recruited into the misreading. The question I kept asking myself once I understood it was this. If you had known on day 1 what you knew by day 700, would the recognition have been enough to protect you? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. The emotional pull of being seen, of being made to feel like the most important person in a room by someone who seems completely certain about you, is not easily neutralized by intellectual knowledge. That pull is older and deeper than analysis, and anyone who tells you they would have seen through it is probably someone it hasn't happened to yet. Was the love bombing a weapon he consciously deployed, or a reflection of how he actually experienced connection, and the harm was the consequence of that, not the intention? The answer shapes everything that follows.